Hello, everyone. I'm Charlene from Culture Central. I'm the Partnerships and Development Manager. I am the dark-skinned Black woman with curly afro hair. I have pink lipstick on and hoop earrings and the geometric print top on. Welcome everyone for watching today. Thank you for all joining in for day 3 of Radical Listening Week. We are going to be joined by an amazing panel from the LGBTQI+ community, hosted by the amazing Jasmine. I'm going to hand over to them right now, and I hope you have an amazing session and I hope you learn. Please join in with the conversation and engage in the comments and, you know, anything that you would like to do, any feedback that you have for us. And we are really excited to hear what this community has to say. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I just want to welcome everyone to Radical Listening Week. And this is brought to you by More Than a Moment and Culture Central. For those who don't know, More Than a Moment was born in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd as a space to radically reflect and invite conversation and change for equality. And so what this is today is a radical listening session for the LGBTQI+ creative workforce. There are radical listening sessions all week. And definitely please do check the others out on Thursday and Friday this week. So yes, my name is Jasmine Gardosi. My pronouns are they, she. I am a gender non-conforming Eurasian mixed race person with very euphoric brown hair with short back and sides and a burnt orange t-shirt. I'm Birmingham Poet Laureate. I'm also a beatboxer and my work centers around LGBTQ+ issues and gender identity. And I also run workshops on these topics, as well as finding voice, exploring, giving voice to discrimination as well. So today we are talking about the lived experiences as LGBTQI+ people, the barriers faced, and also maybe definitely talking about the solutions for those barriers. So what I'm going to do is right now I'm going to hand over just to introduce our contributors who are going to introduce themselves really. They're going to give their names, their pronouns, give an audio description of themselves, and also a short summary of their work that they do and the areas that they focus on in their creative practice. So I'm firstly going to hand over to Willy.
Hello, my name's Willy. My pronouns are they or he, and I am wearing, I'm wearing a light blue shirt with lots of different shades of blue in squares on it. I have a beard at the moment. I have brown hair. My beard's also brown. I'm white, and I'm 30. Yeah, that's a visual description. What color are my eyes? My eyes are hazel. And I am a producer, project manager, freelance arts person. I've sort of done most jobs in the arts at some point or another. And yeah, generally my work is queer, or my practice is queer and care-centered. But yeah, I've worked on everything from festivals to cabaret nights to development programs to outdoor events, indoor kids parties. Yeah, lots of different pies that I've had my fingers in. I'm going to stop talking and pass over to Sym.
Thank you, Willy. Hi, everyone. My name is Sym. My pronouns are they, them, or it, if you're feeling spicy. I'm a mixed Black, light-skinned, gender-void thing. I have sort of like I was bold and now it's sort of like outgrown, but like blonde with my dark brown roots coming through. I'm wearing a long sleeve gray top with a sort of like a, I don't know, like beige sort of like a, what's it called, waistcoat, and some necklaces, stretched ears, and some ringy dings, rings. And yeah, what do I do? Similar to Willy, like many fingers in all of the pies. So I would say I'm a movement artist, performer, curator of sorts, artist liaison, culture worker, community worker. I work a lot with queer communities, Black, queer, neurodivergent artists. I do a lot of artist advocacy, a lot of things centered around access riders and care, ritual-based and holistic work for and with artists and collectives to help their well-being, help them to produce work. And yeah, I'm also a Reiki practitioner. I work a lot with energy. Also, if you hear sirens in the background, I live in a very noisy neighborhood. Just another description there for you. And yeah, what else? So I recently curated a performance arts scratch night called Itch, which was supported by Fierce Festival. I will be doing ritual workshops and more artist care things. And I think I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Willy and Sym. It's great to have this snapshot of your work. So a couple of things before we really launch into the questions and the discussions. I'm going to be keeping time to make sure that we cover as much as we can in the time that we do have, give all the elements like due consideration. So I just want to thank you both in advance for your understanding, for my timekeeping efforts. I also might gesture with a thumbs up occasionally if I feel like you've just made an amazing point which deserves reflection or space for a response. You can keep going if that's the flow and you're in flow and you're if you need to keep speaking. You can also use it as an opportunity or an invitation, I guess, to finish speaking so that we can respond to it or flow on from it, I suppose. And also to everyone who is watching, we are aware we're just three people who identify as LGBTQI+ in some way. And there are as many genders and sexualities as there are people on the planet. And so these are purely our experiences. And we know we can't speak for everyone who identifies as such. So we're very aware of that. And we also invite your thoughts in the comments if you're watching on YouTube right now. So yes, with that, I'd like us to delve into the first sort of question, which I'd like to ask. And this is to do with barriers and challenges and opportunities that come with being an LGBTQI+ person in the creative workforce. Specifically, the challenges and opportunities, because they can be both. These things aren't always black and white. So Willy, I want to ask you first, what are the challenges and the opportunities that you've come across when working in the creative arts sector, based on your LGBTQI+ experiences as a gender fluid queer person?
Thank you, Jas. Yeah, it's tricky. Also, it's tricky sometimes to unpick them from one another, because often some of those opportunities, as in literally they are opportunities offered to LGBTQIA+ people, those come with their own challenges, which is also sort of a non-answer, so I will expand on that. But yeah, often we are offered work that maybe is queer. Like now I think that most, everything from a grand scale festival to a one-day event to a singular party will often have a strand of queerness, of queer programming. Like people tend to think about that in wanting to appeal commercially to a broader audience, and also, and this sounds negative, but I mean at its base, also wanting to appear ethical as a company. Some people are genuinely being ethical in that, but at its base, it is wanting to appear ethical, at least. So it does mean that there's work there, and it does mean that you can be out and proud at work in many contexts, because in some ways that will get you work, or that will mean that people will think of you for certain opportunities. That's great that we're at a place where, that you're able to kind of be yourself And ideally, that would mean bringing your whole self to work. I don't think it always does, because to, kind of expand on one of the things that I was saying just before, because there is this sort of expectation now that, there will be at least a component that is for or by the queers. And I use that term as a general term, but by or for our community. It also means that sometimes thought isn't put into that, and the people are booking, they are literally just booking. And I'm speaking more for artists, I would say. And my experience of this is slightly different as someone who tends to work behind the scenes. But for people who are in front of the scenes, there are, sort of horror stories of them being booked and no one's really put any thought into, okay, well, what is it to travel to this certain location at this certain time of night, to and from, potentially in drag, for example, or, with lots of costumes, or, is it unsafe? Like the concerns that they might not be thinking of for counterparts who work not in kind of queer art forms. And by that, I do kind of mean things like drag and voguing and things like that. So there's a challenge within that in and of itself. It's sort of that double bind. But also there are lots of opportunities that I think I have been able to establish a career in this industry in a relatively short space of time, partly because of my sexuality, which I don't know if you're supposed to say, but like also because I'm good at my job. Not just, people aren't just hiring me because of who I fancy. But I think the work was there. There's a lack of producers in general. And then so if you have a niche, which somehow sexuality has become, but that's a complicated issue, then there's a through line there for you to get that work. Am I rambling? Does this any of this make sense?
No, I think everything is making a whole load of sense. Thank you.
That's okay. I'll let someone else speak and then we can go off.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving voice to some really important points, namely two huge things that I picked up on, and feel free as well, Sym, if you'd like to jump in on this. Is that the artist exists not just at the event. It's not like we go to an event, be fabulous or whatever we want to be called or are called, and then just step out of the event and like disappear in a puff of smoke. We need to get to the venue and away from the venue safely, like you say, and access to the event doesn't just mean being invited to the event. It also means what happens outside that space. Can we get to and from those events safely, and has consideration been put to that? So I think it's really, really important that you bring that up, Willy. Also, I think it's a really such a huge point. This idea of our artists, LGBTQI plus artists, being booked for the reasons of optics, or for the reasons of true understanding about what is being brought, what value is being brought. I think it's such a good point. And for me, it does kind of, I don't know about you, Sym, I might ask you about this in a second, but it points towards tick box culture a little bit, which I do find concerning, because maybe the representation is there, but not necessarily the practice. And does that mean that there's a true understanding about the experiences and the plight and the value and the importance of bringing these voices to the table? Or is it just because these tick boxes are being followed because that's the way the wind blows right now? And considered the right thing to do. And I'm going to come to you in a second, Sym, but for me, we need, as a society, an understanding and true education about the issues that are being faced right now to match what's actually happening, because as we're seeing, the wind isn't blowing, it isn't going to be blowing that way. We're already feeling a turn in the tide the wind is not necessarily blowing that way, and the wind will not always blow that way. And so when it becomes less trendy to give platforms to people of those niches, there needs to be a foundation of understanding, true understanding of what and who we actually are. So Sym, any thoughts on this, and maybe we respond to this and maybe any of Willy's points, and then I will ask you of your own thoughts that to do with barriers, challenges, and opportunities that you've come across yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think Willy and you both raised really good points. I think when it comes to safety, it definitely covers things such as when you sensationalize or objectify queer people for optics, like you say, and you're using them for I don't know, trendiness or the aesthetic of an event or something like that, but you're not considering the humanity of that person, then you are putting them at risk, essentially. Like you say, when it comes to access, travel budgets, like taxi fare, accommodation, like things like this that people see maybe as like a luxury, when actually it's in a lot of ways like a really baseline level of access and care. So I think that's really important, and I definitely think that comes down to, I think just sort of considering the aesthetic over the person. And I think when people do their research, or they, watch the news, or if they know queer or trans people, then they would know what's happening. But I think it's really clear when people are, booking for a certain reason and not actually considering the person as a whole for their and nuances, and and not just what their body can do or what they're going to bring. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like it's definitely something that becomes really transparent, and I don't know, needs to be considered more.
Absolutely. Thanks for speaking to that. I think that's beautifully said, like considering the person as a whole. Imagine if across the arts sector we had more holistic booking, if we want to call it that. That's beautifully said. And considering just the humanity of a person. So I wanted to ask you as well, aside from obviously what me and Willy have been talking about, as a gender void thing, what have you come across so far as the barriers and the challenges in whilst working in this particular sector?
Well, I suppose it sort of comes under my journey sort of within the arts sector. So I sort of started within sort of nightlife, performance, dancing, things like that. And similar to Willy as well, it's sort of a lot of roles I was getting, a lot of jobs or go-go gigs and things like that was because of the queerness, or, brown queerness, do you know what I mean? Which in a lot of ways was beneficial, because I was training in Vogue at the time, and, learning about the history and why it's important to our community, and understanding people's individual stories, and how you use that in your dance form. It's like an emotional language, so that was really important to me. And I understood myself and wider communities on such a different level, and it was a really transformative thing. But then getting booked in certain spaces, say within certain white institutions that don't look at access, or they don't look at wider issues, and they just see it as a trend because voguing is trendy, or getting Black queer people to perform for you is trendy, it just becomes such a sensationalized and almost bordering on fetishizing. And then you just feel, objectified, essentially, in some spaces. There have been so many places where I've worked where people have been so considerate and so kind. And I guess it just makes the contrast even more wide when you see it in a different way. And I suppose also this view on what queerness is and how it's supposed to look, and how you know, like how we're supposed to move and talk and express ourselves. We're supposed to sort of fit within this very small framework when it comes to performance sometimes. So, you know, if you are not like kickity-carring like some people, or like, you know, like how people will view queer cis men, for example, if you're not fitting that, then you're not deemed extravagant enough, or like, you know, like the je ne sais quoi, like whatever it is. And actually, I just want to go and exist and like show my own unique talents. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to be the same as the person standing next to me or performing next to me. And we all have so many different things to bring. Yeah. And I would say, yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of opportunities, like I was saying, and even across, so I've sort of worked in nightlife, but also in dance, and also sometimes like within visual arts. And depending on what sector, sort of also depends on how much care you're given and how much you're considered as a human being versus like your quote unquote identity. So yeah, I think sometimes people can sort of like reduce you down to like who or what you are, rather than like my experiences, or, you know, and so like I was saying, there's that nuance of like, obviously I'm getting booked because I'm talented, but also like, it's like a really weird sort of like totem pole. So yeah, and I think when you bring sort of like Black and brown queerness on top of things, I feel like so what I was saying to you before, Jazz, in terms of like people hiring you as sort of like the bridge to Blackness, do you know what I mean? So like if I am like the darkest person in the room, then usually it's like, what's going on here? What research are you doing, and how do you view Blackness, and are you considering colorism as an aspect on top of queerness and on top of neurodivergence and on top of access? You know, like there's so many layers sometimes, and I think you don't even have to like read 10 million books. Sometimes you just need to like speak to people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if a point, Willy, you had the hand.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't know if we were doing that. But yeah, I just more of a reminder for myself. Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying about that kind of and that being kind of the bookable queer art, particularly at the moment. And it is interesting because it's almost as if, like, well, I guess one of the challenges that LGBTQIA plus creatives face is that the people with the money still tend to be the straight people, and they tend to be the white people, and they tend to be the older people. That is changing to a degree, but like not really. Like it, you know, we can all say we're heading in the right direction, but the end of the road is really far away. And so it does mean that I think sometimes, and this is like an internal challenge, I suppose, as well as an external one, because it's something that we have to grapple with. And certainly it's something that artists that I've worked with have grappled with, is sometimes you almost start to make art, or you start to perform in a certain way, or you start to do X, Y, Z. That is the bookable, is the palatable version of queerness. And that is quite frustrating, and also quite creates an internal turmoil that it has come from externally, but is quite unfair and difficult to navigate, because obviously you still want to be employed, and it's great that you're sort of doing work where you're like, yeah, I get to be myself. Then you're like, oh, I don't really get to be my whole self. I was having an interesting conversation with an AFAB drag queen recently who doesn't do kakadika, like they don't do lip syncs. They do quite like, they love drag. They absolutely love drag, but their drag is quite, I describe it as slow drag. And I don't mean that disparagingly at all. And we were having a really interesting conversation where she was just like, I just don't know where I can take this. Like, I can make my own thing. And I was very encouraging of that. And I think that should happen, because that will appeal to people. But it's really tricky that there is sometimes I think queer artists are told, right, okay, well, I can be queer, but I've got to be that queer over there. And often that is a version of, as you said, like a cis gay man. And so that creates complications and like mental health. I imagine that affects people's mental health as well. Because you're stuck sort of living someone else's vision. What do you think?
Yeah, no, That's just incredible points, both of you. Thank you so much for building on that. And it's that homogenization, the expectation of that. It's a shame because you're missing out on so much depth. And the beautiful thing about being queer is being our full selves, which inevitably means that we are different. Every single one of us, what we bring is different, and you've both expressed that so well. This idea of like, I have so many different things to bring, like you're saying, or being yourself and your whole self. And it's almost when these things aren't considered, there's almost a missed opportunity, because in many spaces, in every sector, you could argue, outside of the arts, there's a particular pressure of this perceived idea of professionalism, which is problematic in itself, and where you cannot be yourself, and we need to adapt a certain code. And in fact, the arts space is pretty much a gigantic opportunity where we can be ourselves the most, more than anywhere else. And that should be. I think that there's more opportunity there for us to really be given a chance to lean into that, because there's so much to learn. There's so much to offer from what we bring, to be quite honest. So I just want to thank you both for talking about that. So what I'd like us to do now is move on, now that we've talked about quite a few really, really important issues, to sort of solutions and ideas. So if the change makers and the organizers or the gatekeepers in our workforce were listening to this, and they will, what would you say needs to change? What needs to be done? What can be done? What are the things that you're quite excited to see being done differently? And what I'll do is I'll go to Sym first, and then we'll hand over to Willy.
Yeah, it's interesting because what I was going to respond to with Willy, I suppose in some ways kind of feels like leaning into solutions, like what you said about slow drag, but then I was like musing over the word slowness and how sometimes we're not afforded this opportunity to be slow when it comes to like working within the arts or working freelance, or, you know, everything has to be like on it. You have to be out there. You always have to be networking. You have to understand what people are interested in and like seeing where all the opportunities are coming from. Do you know what I mean? And it can be exhausting. And I think sometimes like we are not afforded the opportunity to, one, rest or just pause, and two, to just be slow, to have slow musings over things, to just explore something other than this like baseline of like queer. Do you know what I mean? And I have seen a lot of opportunities where, you know, it can be addressed for queer people, but not solely focused around queerness. But I think there needs to be a lot more, just a lot more opportunities or work developments or residencies, these slow processes that we can have where we're unpicking parts of ourselves. Because I think when we go down this spiral of like identity politics, and like Willy was saying, it's sort of like you feel like you need to adapt in a certain way, but then you're losing sense of like who you actually are. And I feel like even recently, I feel like I'm trying to center more of like my own spiritual belief system and what I want to focus on, rather than like what people think I need to be focusing on. And yeah, sometimes I don't always benefits me, but then I still feel like I'm walking towards authenticity. And I think that's really important. So I think, to start with these slow processes, more like extended development opportunities where there is no push for an outcome, you know, and also that also depends on where the money is coming from, right? I mean, I know that a certain council is bankrupt right now, but you know, like different funding bodies when it comes to how they're sharing funding opportunities, who they're reaching out to, and slowness. What would you say, Willy?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't see a huge amount of opportunities, I suppose, for and I think we spoke about this briefly before, but a huge amount of opportunities for LGBTQIA plus people to like make work or do work or whatever it is that also it doesn't center their queerness. Like I feel like it often we're booked and told like, okay, and it almost makes you think, oh, I'm only getting this job, or I'm only getting this commission, or I'm only getting to do this to either just because I'm a bit different and okay, great, or like to explain it to the majority, and that can be really frustrating. I think as well for people to be like, okay, great, well now I spend half my life explaining my life to people who don't and currently understand, or maybe actually don't want to understand, but fine. So yeah, more opportunities, more money, pay us. Yeah, pay queers more. That don't quote me on that. But yeah, I think often there's also like a degree of when you're in a minority, and this kind of applies across the board, but obviously we're specifically speaking about LGBTQIA plus people today. Sometimes I can't think of another word except opportunities, but opportunities are almost framed as like bigger and better for you than they would be for someone who is like straight, cis, white, etc. Which is why there's that whole culture of like, oh, this would be great for exposure. It's like, okay, sure. Or oh, this would be great for your CV, or oh, this would be great for, oh, you will you do it for 100 quid? And that's not necessarily coming from people even within our community, but even in them offering that thing to queer people, there's a power dynamic established there where you're saying, okay, like this is of benefit for me. Like you're sort of putting the person who's offering, while they're maybe doing a kindness, they're also sort of establishing something where they're like, oh, well, you need this, and so you should maybe be grateful. And I think that exists in like a micro way in those small instances, and in obviously that replicates into a macro way. Like that is unfortunately the way the world works at the moment. But yes, more opportunities that are for queer people, but are not necessarily that they have to make work about their queerness. And also, yeah, I think speaking like that is kind of for artists, but speaking again like in a more production managery head, like don't just book me for like if you're running a let's say, I don't know, a stage at a city's festival for an evening, you need someone to manage that stage. That person can just happen to be queer. That person doesn't, just because they're not free on the day that there's the queer stuff, the queer programming, you can book them for a different day. Like their stage management is not going to, they might have obviously be better maybe thinking about certain issues that might arise around safety or pronouns or whatever. They might have those things in mind, sure, but they'll do that even if it's majority straight people who are booked on the lineup. So sometimes there's also that kind of pigeonholing. Stop doing that. That would be good.
Wicked. Thank you, Sym, and thank you, Willy. There's so many things there, very, very clearly laid out, to be honest. And I think one of the things that I want to sort of pick up on is this idea of the nature of opportunities and how they are offered. And this idea, as Sym was saying, that sometimes it's very hard to truly bring our full selves authentically to our work when certain opportunities are very much from the outset steering a creative response that has to be about something or responding to identity politics in some way. And sometimes queerness goes beyond all the things that are spoken about in on or part of current conversation. Queerness goes beyond that. Queerness can is Sym has used this phrase before, and you can expand on this as well a little bit yourself if you want, Sym, about looking at the beyond, which I think is really beautiful and amazing. I think also something that I picked up on from both of you is this idea of who gives the opportunities, or who gatekeeps those opportunities. And I'm really interested in, like, what do you both think of community-based power? And how does that look potentially so far as the people who are the gatekeepers of those opportunities? I'll go to Sym first. That's all right. Please respond to whatever you would like to respond to.
Yeah, there's so many things that jump out from, I don't know, like the last 5 minutes. I feel like my mind's gonna do like a brain fart now, but so there was gatekeeping, there was who holds these opportunities, right? So yeah, and authenticity. So just bringing myself back on track. So yeah, I feel like for me, like when I think of queerness for myself, and obviously I can't speak on anybody else, I think of queerness as the queering of, and the criticality and the breaking apart of. It's like destroy what you think you know and build it from the ground up, you know? So like for me, as you know, like I say, like I'm a gender void thing, and that's inherently spiritual, it's inherently queer, it's inherently neurodiverse, which is all of the things that I am, but also these are just labels that we use, right, to help us figure out this like little flesh sack that we're existing in the society, you know, like this cis hetero patriarchal system. And so we have to use these words in order to place ourselves, but also for others to see us in a way. And obviously no one's ever going to really truly see us, you know, as queer people or just as an individual, like period. But like, yeah, the language can be important, but I think sometimes it's hard when you're existing within these systems and you're getting like suffocated within them, you know, and then you feel like you can't branch out outside of it. So like, yeah, so almost like what I was saying the other day of like being anti-professional, because who defines professionalism as a queer person when you're stepping into, say, like, I don't know, a corporate something, which I don't do, but if I were to, what does that mean for me? What do I have to conform to? Whose system and who made that and why? Do you know what I mean? So for me, yeah, like lots of poems. Queering is like the criticality of things. So I'm thinking about why these systems are set up in the first place, and does it even benefit us? Do you know what I mean? And then what I was saying, what was the other point? What was the question?
Gatekeeping and who holds the power or the opportunity, and the idea of maybe community-based power and stuff like that. Yeah,
so I love a grassroots movement. I love like the community steering, you know, things. I love mutual aid. I love these like systems of support that we have to build, because the system isn't going to do it for us, and obviously the system doesn't care if we live or die. So, you know, I think it's really important to have these levels of solidarity, but also like intra-community, depending on how you see community and what community is to you. But not just saying like, okay, I'm going to help queer people. You're inherently understanding that queer people are neurodiverse, and they can also be disabled, and they could also, do you know what I mean? Like live in a council estate. How do all these things intertwine? And like, these are all coming under the same umbrella of oppression at the end of the day. And whilst I love community-based power, I also think on the flip side, because, you know, these gate-kept funding bodies and these money pots that are like hanging over our heads, we end up overworking, burning out. We end up like getting to that point of we're so exhausted that we can't even help ourselves, never mind the people that we're here to support in the first place. So I think it's really important that we're also embedding this level of care and rest into it, whilst knowing that rest is also a really big privilege. Do you know what I mean? To be able to actually rest and take a moment to pause is something that I sometimes have the privilege of, and I don't take that for granted. And so, yeah, I think people that are really on the ground and doing that work, they're probably burnt out and exhausted and probably need somebody to support them, but there is nobody to support them. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's just that thing that's just like, yeah, you know, because it's what we need, but also how are they supported at the same time, whilst knowing that financial and material support is so limited.
It's so much to, I think you said it perfectly there. I've got nothing to add to that. Though, like, I will say that, like, just on one of the points that you mentioned, the idea of this structure of these organizations and institutions above us, holding all of the power, all of the money, all of the funding. It is exhausting, and it puts you in a scarcity kind of mindset and existence. And it's interesting because it leads back to a couple of the other things that you've saying, and Willy was saying as well, this idea of kind of being asked, like, oh, who are the queer people we should book, and who are the queer Black people we should book, for example, and without doing the work, almost putting the onus on people like yourself to do the free consultation work, or, you know, and is there another way of doing it? For example, giving people who are working at the grassroots level, at the artists level, the funding pots, perhaps, to be smaller gatekeepers than ourselves. That really excites me, the idea that we can be the ones that make decisions, because we understand and know the community. The organizations asking, what can we do to understand or to connect better with the communities, to engage communities? Trust us. We know our communities. Give us the power, and don't just give us, like, the work, as in the free work, the free consultation work. Don't just consult us. Give us the money. Give us the funding. We know where it's needed. So Willy, anything that you'd like us? We've got about haven't given you loads of time. We've got 3 minutes left, roughly, just before we start wrapping up. I'm really intrigued to know.
So I'll clarify that point that you've just raised. In my experience was that often I think when you develop a small name for yourself in a certain space, then organizations will tend to start reaching out and saying, oh, who would you book if they need to book a queer for something? Who would you book for XYZ? Who would you book to vogue at this? Do you know a group of people who are free in September who could do, and so on and so forth? And that's fine. It's, you know, good to give, like, friends and colleagues work. It's good to get their name out there, but often that is where organizations will then stop. They'll go, okay, I know a mixed race dancer who does circus hooping now, who's queer. Great, that's tick loads of boxes. We'll book them for everything. That's ideal. And also that when it's repeated becomes like free labor that you're doing off gym. But on your other point, so I just wanted to clarify exactly what that situation was. And yeah, it can be tiring. And also it is, I don't know everyone, or any of us don't know everyone. And then so we are suggesting our friends or colleagues, and then that's not ideal. And that ties into my response to what you were just saying, is that while I think it would be, yeah, great if different people were given these pots of money to govern or to dole out or whatever, I also think that it's complicated because the LGBTQIA plus community is not a totemic singular community. And so until further work is done, making clear those intra-community bonds and ties, I'm not anti it at all, because I think change is good, and let's, you know, in fact, get rid of the system that currently exists. But if you were to give, like, there are also inherent problems in that, because our community is communities, and so there would have to be like kind of work done around that. And you don't just want people to be like, okay, well, you know, I know these 10 artists, that's great, they can have this money, which I'm sure most people wouldn't, but there's just, yeah, I think there's something more complex to be negotiated. What I really wanted to say around that. And yeah, to emphasize that idea of intra-community being, like a sort of Sym touched on it, that being really vital, because we all live in our intersections, and one day we might feel more something or less something else, or however, but those are inescapable. But if there are people who sit at those intersections, then get them together. Like Sym and I worked together last year for Fierce, and there was a steering group, and I think it's a great idea and a great model. I think that it is good to get people together to make decisions who aren't necessarily always in the same room or haven't been in the same room previously. And often they, after that, then do want to be in the same room again, because those different perspectives help build something stronger. Yeah.
That's brilliantly said. I think that's a really important point. That's I think we've probably all seen that many times, actually, when just the issues, like the downsides to giving power or funding it to a certain place. There are problems there. There's complexities there. I think
we
it's
see
really
it at a major level, right? Like people make their mates prime minister. So like, if that's happening, I guess we to too higher standards, to be honest.
Yes. That's, great point. Also, our community is communities, I think, is a phrase that like everyone should be putting on t-shirts, to be quite honest. So we have 14 minutes left. I feel like we've covered loads. I feel like we could cover loads more, but what I thought I'd do is just bring together some of the things that we've spoken about, bring together just the key themes of what we've been talking about. So for me, being yourself and being your whole self as an artist is, it's, art spaces are kind of unique in that that's where we'll get to be our most authentic selves, but there are barriers to that, and considering the humanity of a person. I'm just bringing out certain phrases that maybe we can or our audience can take away from this. Considering the humanity of a person, considering the person as a whole when being booked or being engaged as an artist, that makes a big difference to bringing our whole authentic selves as artists into a space. And knowing I have so many different things to bring, I feel like there's an overarching theme really of we are all different, not just as LGBTQI plus people, but as artists. And in order for that to be truly celebrated, the ways in which the sector works needs to reflect difference in all its forms. Also, just something that as a poet I want to click at, you don't need to read 10 million books, you just need to speak to people. So far as working with people that may be your demographics that you're not a part of. So far as like solutions and things like that, we've talked about the opportunity to be slow. Things don't need to be fast. This sort of hyper productivity culture. How else can we do things? How else can we destroy what we think we know and build it from the ground up? We've also been talking about putting more power into the grassroots, but also the potential complexities around that. And intra-community, I think, is a really important thing. Talked about travel bursaries as well, and considering the safety of artists outside of just the event or just the space that we're in. And extended.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jazz, but can we? I really want, if anyone is watching, to like really hammer that point home. Like, obviously, homophobic and transphobic violence has risen incredibly in the last few years. Like between 2021 and 2022, transphobic violence, I think, rose 60% in this country, which is wild, and obviously such a backslide. And I think sometimes people think booking a trans artist is doing the work. It isn't. That isn't the work being done. That's great that you've employed them for that day, but you've also put them at risk, like in a way, and so that needs to be engaged with. It is because of the current socio-cultural climate in this country and political climate, increasingly dangerous to be LGBTQ+. It is increasingly dangerous to present as queer or different, and I've seen that even on a really small like micro within friends of mine. Like, people are less keen to maybe wear nail polish if they're male presenting than even like 2 years ago. Like, it is impacting us in our daily lives, and that includes our work, because work is so much of our daily lives. So I just wanted to jump in to really, like, safety is access concern.
Thank you.
And that is something that organizations should absolutely be thinking about more and more.
Thank you. Go on, Sym.
Oh no, I was just saying preach it, because it's
yeah.
Like, it's valid, it's true. Like, safety is access, I think, needs to be also on a t-shirt. And Willy, you get all the t-shirt t-shirt phrases.
You're gonna have a wardrobe. Safety is access.
Yeah, it's true. Like, just widening what we think of as access. That's the last thing. So yeah, what we're saying.
Yeah, widening what we think of as access. That's a beautiful point. And I want to thank Willy for just really compounding that point. And I want to ask one final question in the small time we have now that we have wrapped up and we've got just a tiny bit more space, just on what Willy has, just on the back of what Willy has said, which is the landscapes and attitudes are changing, and it's scary. It's scary. I'm scared. And yes, access and safety is one thing that is needed. What also do we need what else do we need for the months and the years to come, as maybe we notice that change when maybe, say, trans non-binary people become less trendy to support, especially in the art sector, where people are putting their pronouns in their emails, but maybe they're misgendering people when they actually go to work with them. For me, it betrays a knowledge, and this is, I'll answer this first because I think this is close to my heart. It betrays a knowledge that they need to do this thing without the actual understanding and education to truly back it. So what I would like, and what I believe that what we need for the months and years to come, is actual understanding of why you're putting your pronouns in your bio, why you need to be considering the needs of, say, gender non-conforming people, or just generally LGBTQI plus people in the room. True understanding of what actually is happening, and why. So it doesn't just feel like, oh yeah, I gotta do it. Maybe we can go to Sym. Sym can answer, touch on anything, and then we'll finish with Willy.
Yeah, just a really quick one. I'm not sure necessarily in the context of the arts per se, because I think when it comes to like baseline survival safety, sometimes I feel like, outside of travel bursaries and booking accommodation, for example, like making sure that people are physically safe when they get to and from work, I wonder like what else can be done within art sectors. I understand that I think there's sometimes like limitations outside of, say, education, educate yourself, know what doing the work actually means, on like a really like on the ground level. When I was watching this documentary, and I was looking at, there's this group called Family Values in London, and they sort of go outside and do rallies, but they also interject when it comes to potentially violent situations, and they de-escalate themselves. So it's sort of like, quote unquote, policing your own communities, even though I don't like the word policing, but sort of like managing your community and de-escalating violent situations without police having to get involved, for example. So like, I know other people have spoken before about leather, DYKES, you know, on motorbikes, and like making sure that they're keeping this community safe. Like I know A for Activism, which is based in Birmingham, they did martial arts or like self-defense classes, things like that, where if it ever comes down to it in that regard, there's like a physical safety element, you know. But on an institutional level, outside of like get your finger out your, you know, your bumhole and like open your eyes, I'm not sure. So yeah.
No, I totally get you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sym. And Willy?
So I guess this is like visioning for the future, kind of. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really agree with what Sym has said. I think that because there is such a breadth to the LGBTQIA plus community, that it's important that when people are doing consultation, I think sometimes they'll book like a DEI, diversity and inclusion, advisor for 2 days to come into their organization and be like, tick, 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 this is what you should do. I would suggest not doing that. And I would suggest actually maybe you invite a sort of focus group, which I know this isn't like a normal way to do it, but if I am thinking about what organizations could do and how it might be more impactful for them moving forward, then what I might do if I was in charge of something is to invite people to apply to join a focus group. You might have younger people, older people, all within our communities, a trans person, etc., and from there build a best practice, because, you know, as people, as humans, whatever, we are all intersectional, but then within the LGBTQIA plus community, there are lots of like further intersections. You know, even on this call, we represent different parts of the community, but by no means all of it in any way. And I think it's really important to always remember that, because it is easy to get kind of paint with the same brush. And yeah, we should treat everyone similarly, but it's about like equity as well, not just like equality, it's about equity. And so also sometimes making sure that certain people are getting certain considerations made because of a difference that doesn't affect someone else. You know, I, as a white male presenting person, I'm not facing the same challenges that other people are. And so, yeah, I think get rid of like that corporate advisor who makes what, like $2,000 giving you a little chat to be like, be nice. Well, actually, if you'd like to book me, I will do that. But I think it would be better to ask a group of people. And Sym, what were you about to say? I think you were going to interject. What were you going to say?
And I was like 3 minutes. It's going to take like 30 seconds, literally off the back of what you just said. And I know Theus has said that they do this sort of level of transparency where they get their freelancers to sit in on board meetings. So if there's something, say, this level of accountability and transparency, even if institutions are posting their minutes, how they're making decisions, how they're talking about the work that they're doing, that level of like just transparency where they just like post their minutes or a recording of how they do their meetings, I think would help as well to help us hold them accountable.
Rare. Wicked. Oh gosh. I'm in love with that transparency. I'm also in love with just that idea of fun, the EDI educator coming in for a day with a PowerPoint presentation, you know, that's what gets institutions and organizations disconnected from the actual lived experiences, and that's where performative allyship just like sprouts, and then that's it. I love your suggestion, both of you, and Willy, your suggestion of like you said, like a focus group that's beautifully described. And we have a final minute left now. So I just want to thank both of you for everything that you've brought today. It's been incredible. And I want to thank everyone who's watched this. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. Please continue to engage in the conversations. Thank you also for bearing with my overheating phone. And I want to thank again More Than a Moment and Culture Central for offering this space to us today, and also Arts Council England and the Festival Legacy, which funded this to happen. And now I'm going to hand back over to Charlene.
Yes, thank you so much, Jazz, Willy and Sym, for your amazing contributions, and the team at Culture Central and More Than a Moment. Really want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Please continue to join us for the rest of the week. We have some more amazing insights from other community groups. But thank you all again. This is the end of our live stream, so goodbye. Thank you.